Hi, welcome back to Tracy's Diary. I'm really happy you're here, wherever you are right now. Maybe you're walking home after a long day. Maybe you're cleaning your room. Maybe you're sitting by the window with a cup of tea. Or maybe you can't sleep, whatever brought you here. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. Today's diary is about a feeling I wish I didn't know so well. A feeling that quietly shows up without asking for permission. It doesn't knock on the door, it simply appears. Usually on an ordinary day, when you're not expecting it. For me, it happened on a Tuesday night. Nothing exciting. I had just finished dinner. My apartment was unusually quiet. The dishes were still in the sink because I had promised myself I'd wash them later. You know, the kind of later that sometimes becomes tomorrow. I changed into my favorite oversized t-shirt, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and curled up on the couch. It had been a normal day. Not amazing. Not terrible. Just normal. I wasn't sad. I wasn't especially happy either. I was simply existing, and sometimes those are the moments when your mind becomes the loudest. Without thinking much, I picked up my phone. I told myself I'd scroll for 5 minutes, just 5. I think we've all said that before. The first few posts were exactly what you'd expect. A funny video, a recipe I'll probably never cook. A dog wearing sunglasses, nothing life-changing. Then I saw a photo of someone I went to high school with. She was standing in front of a beautiful apartment building, holding a small set of keys. The caption said, "Finally, my first home." Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, people were congratulating her. And honestly, I was happy for her. I really was. She worked hard. She deserved it. I smiled, pressed the like button, and kept scrolling. A few seconds later, another post. This time it was someone from college. He had just been promoted to a management position. There was a picture of him in a new suit, smiling confidently in front of an office building. Dreams do come true. I kept scrolling. Vacation photos, engagement photos, baby photos. People celebrating anniversaries, people running marathons, people launching businesses, people moving abroad. Every photo seemed to say the same thing. Look how wonderful life is. And then, without even realizing it, I stopped looking at their lives. I started judging my own. I looked around my apartment. The laundry basket was still full. My bookshelf was messy. There was a coffee mug on the table from yesterday. My tea was getting cold, and suddenly, my peaceful little evening didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt small. I remember whispering something to myself, not loudly, just quietly enough that only I could hear it. What am I doing with my life? It's such a dangerous question. Not because it's wrong, but because when you're already feeling vulnerable, your mind rarely gives you a kind answer within minutes. I wasn't comparing facts anymore. I was comparing stories. Their happiest moments against my most ordinary one. And, of course, I lost, because that's how comparison works. It never asks for the whole picture. It only shows you the highlight reel of someone else's life, while making you stare at the behind-the-scenes version of your own. I closed the app, put my phone face down on the couch, took a sip of tea. It was cold now. I walked over to the window. Outside, the city looked exactly the same as it always did, cars passing by. A couple walking their dog. Someone riding a bicycle. An old man watering the plants on his balcony. The world hadn't changed, only my thoughts had. And somehow, that made all the difference. I stood there for a long time, looking at the lights in the distance. Then I asked myself a question, not, why am I behind? But, who convinced me that I was supposed to be ahead? That question stayed with me. Long after I went to bed. Long after I turned off the lights. Long after I closed my eyes, because maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't my life. Maybe it was the way I had been measuring it. I couldn't stop thinking about that question. Who convinced me that I was supposed to be ahead? The strange thing is, I couldn't find a single person to blame. Nobody had called me a failure. Nobody had told me I wasn't successful enough. In fact, if one of my friends had looked at my life, they probably would have said, "You're doing just fine." So, why didn't it feel that way? I think the answer is much quieter than we realize. Sometimes, the loudest voices in our lives don't belong to other people anymore, they become our own. Somewhere along the way, I started collecting invisible deadlines. By 22, I thought I should know exactly what career I wanted. By 25, I imagined I'd have a stable job, a beautiful apartment, and enough money to stop checking my bank account before ordering dessert. By 30, well, I thought I'd have everything figured out. It's funny, isn't it? When we're children, 30 sounds like the age when adults magically become experts at life. Bills, easy. Relationships, easy. Confidence, easy. Everything just works. But the older I get, the more I realize that most adults are simply making the best decisions they can with the information they have. No one wakes up one morning and suddenly understands everything. We're all learning. We're all improvising. Some people just hide it better. When I was little, I used to watch my mom doing ordinary things, paying bills, cooking dinner, talking on the phone. She always looked so calm, so certain. I honestly believed adults never felt confused. Years later, I asked her what her 20s were like. She laughed. The kind that comes from remembering something slightly embarrassing. She said, I had no idea what I was doing. I stared at her. Really? She nodded double quotes most of the time. That surprised me. Because in my memories, she seemed to have everything under control. Maybe that's another trick our minds play on us. We look at people who are 10 years older, or 20 years older, and assume they've always been this confident. We forget that they had their own sleepless nights, their own mistakes, their own moments of sitting on the edge of the bed wondering, am I doing this right? I wish someone had told me that earlier. Not because it would have solved everything, but because it would have made me feel less alone. A few days after that Tuesday night, I met one of my closest friends for coffee. She's the kind of person who always seems cheerful, always smiling, always making everyone else laugh. If you saw her online, you'd probably think she had the perfect life. We talked about work, about movies, about how expensive everything has become lately. Then, almost out of nowhere, she looked at me and said, Can I tell you something without you judging me? I said, of course. She took a deep breath. Then she'll batzes time it wappy smile. It was the kind people wear when they're trying not to cry. She sighed. I feel like everyone else is moving forward except me. For a second, I honestly didn't know what to say. Because those were almost the exact words I had whispered to myself only a few nights before. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt so unbelievably human. I looked at her and said, I've been thinking the exact same thing. She blinked. Really? Really? We both started laughing. Again, not because anything was hilarious, but because to people who thought they were struggling alone, had accidentally found each other, that conversation stayed with me. It made me wonder how many people are walking around every day, thinking they're the only ones who haven't figured life out. How many people smile in photos and then go home wondering if they're enough. How many people congratulate their friends while secretly questioning themselves, probably more than we think. Maybe even the people we're comparing ourselves to. Sometimes I imagine what would happen if everyone suddenly became completely honest. No filters, no carefully chosen captions, no pretending. Just honesty. Maybe someone's dream job comes with constant anxiety. Maybe that beautiful apartment also comes with a huge mortgage. Maybe the perfect relationship is going through a difficult season. Maybe the person traveling the world feels lonely every single night. We rarely see those parts. Not because people are lying, but because that's not usually what we choose to share. And honestly, I understand. I don't post photos of the days when I cry over something small. I don't take pictures of the moments when I doubt myself. I don't upload videos of me sitting on the kitchen floor at 10 o'clock at night, wondering whether I'm doing enough with my life. Those moments are real, but they're quiet. They happen behind closed doors, which means everyone else's quiet moments stay hidden too. Maybe that's why comparison feels so unfair. We're comparing our entire lives to someone else's favorite memories, and somehow we expect ourselves to win. I don't think anyone can. The morning after I met my friend, I decided to leave my apartment a little earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere important to be. I just needed some fresh air. Sometimes, when my thoughts become too loud, walking helps. The city was already awake. People were rushing to work. Buses were stopping every few minutes. Motorcycles passed by one after another. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked like they had somewhere to go. I wondered if they all felt as lost as I did sometimes, or maybe they had simply learned how to hide it. I stopped at a small coffee shop near the park. It's not one of those fancy places you see on Instagram. The tables don't match, the chairs are a little old. The menu is handwritten, but somehow it feels warm. Familiar, the barista recognized me. Good morning, Tracy. The usual? I smiled. Yeah, so usual. While I was waiting for my coffee, I noticed an older man sitting alone by the window. He had a newspaper folded neatly beside him. A small notebook lay open on the table. Every few minutes, he would write something. Then he'd stop, look outside, smile to himself, and write again. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. Actually, he didn't seem to be rushing toward anything at all. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop watching him. Maybe because he looked peaceful, not excited, not wildly happy, just content. There's something beautiful about people who know how to enjoy an ordinary morning. A few minutes later, the barista placed my coffee on the counter as I walked back toward my table. I accidentally dropped one of the sugar packets. Before I could pick it up, the older man reached down and handed it to me. "Here you go," he said with a gentle smile. "Thank you." I was about to walk away, but then he asked, "Rough week?" I laughed. "Is it that obvious?" He smiled again. "Only because you have the same face I used to have. That caught me off guard." The same face. The face of someone who's carrying tomorrow before finishing today. I didn't know what to say. He gestured toward the empty chair across from him. "If you're not in a rush, would you like to sit for a minute?" Normally, I would have politely said no, but for some reason, I said yes. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I just didn't want to be alone with my thoughts anymore. For a while, we didn't talk. We simply sat there, watching people walk past the window. A young couple arguing about directions. A little girl trying to catch a pigeon. A man running because he was obviously late for work. Life just happening. Then he asked me, "How old are you?" 29. He nodded slowly. "I remember 29. Were you worried about your future too?" He chuckled. "Worried? I practically lived there." I laughed. "I thought by 30. I was supposed to have everything figured out." He looked at me for a second, then he asked, "Who told you that?" There it was again, the same question. Different person, different day, same question. I looked down at my coffee. "I don't know exactly." He took a sip of his tea before continuing. "When I was your age, I thought life was a checklist. Graduate, find a job, get married, buy a house, have children, retire." He shrugged. So I kept checking the boxes, and one day, I realized I had completed someone else's list, not my own. I looked at him. He wasn't smiling anymore. I spent years chasing the life I thought I was supposed to want. It wasn't a bad life. But it wasn't mine. Those words settled somewhere deep inside me. Because if I was being honest, I wasn't even sure what my version of success looked like anymore. I only knew what it looked like on other people's social media. The older man closed his notebook. "You know what's interesting?" I shook my head. "When you're young, time feels like it's chasing you. But when you get older, you realize time was never running after you. You were the one running." He stood up slowly, picked up his newspaper, and before leaving, he looked at me and said something I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. Don't spend so much time trying to arrive that you forget to notice where you already are. Then he smiled, waved goodbye, and walked out of the cafe. I never saw him again. Maybe he was just a stranger. Maybe he was exactly the person I needed to meet that morning. Either way, I finished my coffee very slowly. For the first time in days, I wasn't thinking about promotions or apartments or timelines. I was simply watching the sunlight move across the wooden table, and somehow, that felt enough. I kept thinking about what that man said. don't spend so much time trying to arrive, that you forget to notice where you already are. At first, I wasn't even sure what it meant. But over the next few days, I started noticing little things. Not because I was trying to become a more positive person. Honestly, I was just paying more attention one evening. I was walking home after work. Usually, I would have my headphones on. I'd be listening to a podcast, or music, or checking my phone every few minutes. But that day, I walked in silence. I heard birds. I heard children laughing in a nearby park. I heard someone practicing the piano through an open window. None of those sounds were extraordinary. They had probably been there every day. I just hadn't noticed. It made me wonder, how many beautiful things have I missed because I was too busy thinking about where I should be. I also started paying attention to the way I spoke to myself. That part was much harder. One morning, I spilled coffee on my shirt before leaving the house. Without thinking, I said, "You're so careless." A few days later, I forgot to reply to an email. "You're so disorganized." Then, I made a small mistake at work. "You're not good enough." It shocked me. Not because those thoughts were new, but because they sounded so familiar. I had been talking to myself that way for years. Imagine if a friend came to you and said, "I made one mistake today." You tell them, "You're a fail, of course not." So why did I think it was acceptable to say those things to myself? Sometimes the person we spend the most time with is also the person we treat the worst. That realization stayed with me. So I tried a little experiment. Nothing dramatic, nothing life-changing. Every time I caught myself saying something cruel, I paused. Then I asked myself, would I say this to someone I love most of the time? The answer was no. Slowly, my inner voice became a little softer. Not perfect, just kinder. And maybe that's enough. Because healing, at least for me, has never happened all at once. It happens in tiny moments. The moment you forgive yourself for making a mistake. The moment you stop apologizing for taking a break. The moment you celebrate something small. Even if nobody else notices. One Friday night, I cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. I almost took out my phone while I was eating. Then I remembered something. I couldn't remember the last time I had eaten a meal without watching someone else's life on a screen. So I left my phone in another room. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable. Few minutes. I noticed the food tasted better. I noticed I wasn't rushing. I noticed I actually enjoyed my own company. That surprised me. Somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that being alone meant something was missing. But maybe being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Maybe it's simply a chance to hear your own thoughts again. And for the first time in a long time, my thoughts weren't asking, "Why aren't you further ahead?" They were asking something much gentler. "How are you, really?" I liked that question better because it didn't demand achievement. It invited honesty. A few nights later, I opened social media again. The same kinds of posts were still there. New jobs, new relationships, new houses, new adventures. Nothing had changed. Except, this time, I noticed something else. I wasn't in a race with any of them. I never had been. I had simply imagined one, and imaginary races are impossible to win. So I put my phone down, walked to the window, looked at the city lights, and instead of asking, "Am I falling behind?" I asked, "Did I live today in a way that felt meaningful to me?" Some days, the answer is yes. Some days, it's no. But at least now, I'm asking a question that actually belongs to me. A few weeks have passed since that Tuesday night, you know. My life doesn't look very different. I didn't suddenly get a promotion. I didn't move into a bigger apartment. I didn't wake up one morning with all the answers. I'm still figuring things out. I still have days when I feel confused. I still compare myself sometimes. I still wonder if I'm making the right decisions. I'm still human, but something has changed. The pressure is quieter now, not gone, just quieter. Last weekend, I went for a walk just before sunset. The park wasn't crowded. A few people were jogging. Some families were having a picnic. A little boy was trying to teach his grandfather how to fly a kite. They weren't very good at it. The kite kept falling. Every few minutes, they would laugh, pick it up, and try again. I sat on a nearby bench and watched them for a while. The little boy never seemed frustrated. He wasn't thinking, "I should already know how to do this." He wasn't comparing himself to anyone else in the park. He was simply learning. Trying, laughing, trying again, and I caught myself smiling. Because somewhere along the way, adults forget that learning is supposed to look a little messy. We expect ourselves to get everything right the first time. The perfect career, the perfect relationship, the perfect plan. As if making mistakes is a sign that we're behind. But maybe mistakes aren't proof that we're failing. Maybe they're proof that we're living. When I got home that evening, I found an old notebook on my bookshelf. It was one I had written in years ago. I flipped through the pages. Some entries made me laugh. Some made me cringe a little. There was one page that caught my attention. It was written by a younger version of me. At the bottom of the page, I had made a list, things I hope I'll have by the time I'm 30. A successful career, my own apartment, financial freedom, confidence, a happy relationship, a clear plan for the future. I looked at that list for a long time. Then I laughed, not because the dreams were silly. They weren't. They're still beautiful dreams, but I noticed something. Nowhere on that list did I write, "I hope I'm kind." I hope I learn how to forgive myself. I hope I become someone who can enjoy an ordinary Tuesday. I hope I find peace. Maybe that's because when we're younger, we think happiness lives at the finish line. We don't realize it quietly visits us along the way. In a warm cup of coffee, in a conversation with a friend, in a stranger's unexpected wisdom, in the sound of rain outside your window, in finally giving yourself permission to stop rushing. If you're listening to this today, and you feel like everyone else is moving faster than you, I want to tell you something, not because I'm an expert. I'm definitely not. I'm still learning too, but maybe your life isn't late. Maybe it's simply unfolding at a different pace. Flowers don't all bloom on the same day. Some open in early spring. Some wait until summer. Some don't bloom until autumn. But no one looks at a flower and says, "You're behind. it blooms. When it's ready, maybe people are a little like that too. So tonight, before you go to sleep, try asking yourself a different question. Not, am I behind? But, what made today meaningful? Maybe your answer will be tiny. Maybe you made someone smile. Maybe you finally rested without feeling guilty. Maybe you laughed. Maybe you cried. Maybe you simply got through a difficult day. Sometimes that's more than enough. Anyway, that's all for today's diary. Thank you for spending these moments with me. I hope this conversation made you feel a little less alone. Take care of yourself or be patient with yourself. And remember, your story doesn't have to look like anyone else's. To be a beautiful one. I'll see you in the next diary. Good night.